Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Our tradition before we hear from our speakers is to go around and introduce ourselves first. I'd like to suggest just taking a brief pause before you say your name so we don't just rattle through the room. My name is Tom.
Joe Kapolka. David Clark.
David.
Douglas.
Ian.
My name is Peter.
I'm Kei Matsuda.
Robert.
Also Robert.
My name is Mark.
I'm Paul.
I'm John.
My name is Gary Ghost.
Vincent.
My name is Manuel.
Drew.
Gary.
Marshall.
I'm Henry Rabinowitz.
Kurt.
George.
My name is Cal.
Lee Robbins.
Peter. Hank.
Jack.
Tatwan.
Michael.
Mark.
Jim.
Nathan. Paul. Doug.
Carol. Ralph.
My name is Jerry.
Steve.
Richard Azzolini.
My name is Roy. My name is Pepe.
George.
My name is Michael.
Jack.
My name is Tej.
My name is Bruein.
Darcy.
Did we miss anyone?
I'm Kevin.
Just by a show of hands, is anyone here for the first time? Welcome. We will have a social period afterwards, so we'll try and make you welcome as you circulate. Our speaker today is Kevin Griffin. Kevin is the author of One Breath at a Time, Buddhism and the 12 Steps, and A Burning Desire, Dharma, God, and the Path of Recovery. A longtime Buddhist practitioner and 12-step participant, he is a leader in the mindful recovery movement and one of the founders of the Buddhist Recovery Network. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you for having me. Thanks to Jim Stewart also for inviting me again. I was here sometime last year, and actually the talk, I guess through the newsletter, got up to Sebastopol, and the people who own the bookstore Many Rivers up there invited me up there and put me on their radio show, so you guys have been great for promoting me. I appreciate it. Need all the marketing I can get. I'm actually not going to talk about a specifically recovery topic today, since this isn't a group that's necessarily oriented towards that, although I'm sure some of you have been in that world a bit. Nonetheless, many of the things I talk about, even when I'm trying to talk about, I'll say straight Buddhism, if you'll pardon the expression, kind of come back to addiction anyway, because that's kind of, to me, the core teaching of Buddhism is about clinging, and that's what addiction is about. But nonetheless, the topic, and I'll say the title for my talk today, is What is a Buddhist? You know, there are so many cliches now in our culture about Buddhism that it becomes somewhat confusing. People will say things like, well, that's not very Zen of you. You kind of go, Okay, right. And there's books that are kind of the Zen of anything, right? You can just put Zen in the title and that's fine. You're cool in some way. And then I was thinking during the meditation, remembering the last segment on every one of Jon Stewart's Daily Show, where he says, "And now for our moment of Zen." And then, what do they show then? Have you ever tried to connect that with Buddhism? Because it's always something like really bizarre, right-wing kind of. I guess it's supposed to kind of like make your head spin, so you kind of lose. You kind of have a Satori moment or something. I guess it's like a koan. It doesn't make any sense, so you just kind of break into some emptiness. I don't know. The most recent case of this that kind of inspired me to think of this talk was there was an article in the New York Times about Rosanne Cash, Johnny Cash's daughter, who's also a singer-songwriter, and she lives in Chelsea in Manhattan. And at some point, 8 or 10 years ago, I think she got invited to perform at this. It's like a Tibetan museum or something in the neighborhood, and so she's regularly gone back there to perform. And in this article, she said, "Well, I'm not a Buddhist because I kill ants and I eat meat." And I thought, wow, I guess I'm not a Buddhist either. But then I recalled that the Dalai Lama eats meat. And, I mean, who's more Buddhist than the Dalai Lama? On the other hand, you're probably aware of what the Dalai Lama says about homosexuality. And in this kind of there's a falseness about it that the sutras say this, that it's immoral or something, and here he is, supposed to be the epitome of Buddhism, which isn't that founded in compassion and wisdom? Not, oh, that's what the sutras said, so that's what I'm going to do. In fact, the Buddha said specifically, don't believe something just because it's written down. So I guess that means the Dalai Lama is not a Buddhist either. On a lighter note, because I'm really going to get in trouble now. Whenever I go, I travel a bit to teach, and whenever I go to a town, people will say, well, we thought we'd take you out to dinner. There's a really nice Thai restaurant in town. They always assume that I want to eat Thai food because I'm a Buddhist. And really, the truth is I don't really love Thai food. I'd be just as happy to have a burger or some spaghetti, But these are the kind of cliches and the ways that we somehow characterize that you're a Buddhist. My wife, who knows me, better than most people, says that I should write a book called The Bad Buddhist. So that kind of tells you where I stand. Some more reflections on this. I'm a musician, and I remember at the end of a long retreat I was on many years ago. This was 1981, so it was kind of people were still kind of trying to figure out, as we still are, I suppose, what Buddhism was in the West. At the end of the retreat, which had been a long, silent retreat, we went around the room and people said what they did, what their profession was. And most of them were in helping professions, psychologists and nurses and things. They came to me and they said, well, I'm a musician. And people looked at me like, really? What are you doing here? Which hurt my feelings, I will say. But once again, kind of pointing to this very narrow thing. It's like, because musicians, we know that they are just kind of mindless party animals or something, which, well, I had my moments, let's say. But on that same retreat, I was talking to Joseph Goldstein, one of the really most respected Western teachers, and I was talking about kind of this conflict about, I don't know if I want to go back to being a musician. And he said, well, when you're playing music, there's nothing more mindful and present than being awake in the moment. You can't, and listening to music. I mean, as soon as your attention wanders, you miss it. So it seems like a great practice. That was really, really helpful for me. And it was the beginning of me, I would say, starting to just broaden out my idea of what it was that I was doing, my understanding of what I was doing. I remember some years ago, after I had started to teach, a woman coming to a class in Berkeley I was teaching who was very troubled. She was a poet, and she was very troubled by saying that, well, you can't be mindful and be writing poetry or being creative. And she was sort of frustrated and angry that getting the idea that what meditation was not thinking, basically. Well, if I'm thinking or I'm being creative, and then obviously I'm not being mindful. I think, well, wow, that's not how I get it at all. I mean, when I'm writing a song or working on a book, I'm fully engaged in that. Now, there's not as much mindful, and there's this idea that mindfulness is about being detached and like you're observing all the time, which we observe the breath, and there is this quality of kind of watching that happens in practice. But when we are totally focused on something, it means that the quality of concentration is more dominant, which is also part of the Eightfold Path. So I think that what happens to an extent is that people get an idea that one aspect of the teachings are the teachings. Like people will say, oh, well, I heard that Buddhism is all about suffering. I don't really want to be a Buddhist because it's all about suffering. Well, that's the first noble truth. There's three more. Let's try to find out what it all means together. So we create this idea of what a Buddhist is. And then, very often, we create suffering around that because we can't live up to it. Who can live up to being a Buddhist? It's too much. One of the teachings, the 10 perfections, they drive me crazy. When I was on one retreat, I decided I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called The 10 Imperfections. Let's talk about them. Impatience, irritability, sleepiness, cheating on your taxes. So what often happens then, and this is what happened to me in my early practice, as I was still drinking and using, was that we wind up having this split life. We go to the Buddhist center and we're spiritual and we're quiet and mellow and loving and talking about the Dharma. And then we go home and we're ourselves, And then we're, in our relationship, or we're, partying, or we're at work. And all that goes out the window. And so then there's this shame or, just denial, which there was for me. I really just figured, there's 5 precepts. I was like, 4 is enough. What's this not drinking and using thing? Let's not go too far. So again, we have the ideas. Am I a Buddhist? What is a Buddhist? And people ask me, or they'll say to me, well, you're a Buddhist, so blah, blah, blah. And I'll be, hold on. I don't know what you mean by that, but to me, being a Buddhist it's really complicated. Because I can't really define it, I don't say that I'm a Buddhist. Sometimes I do when it's convenient. So it's just, to me, again, it's just kind of like, oh, well, I'm a Buddhist if it's useful. Maybe, is that dishonest? I don't know. Which would, I guess, then make me not a Buddhist. But anyway, my head is spinning. I'm having a moment of Zen, I guess. One of my teachers and now colleagues, Lee Brasington, he just spent 9 months in retreat. 9 days is a lot for me, you know. I did 3 months a long time ago, and since then I've done a month a couple times. But so we were exchanging emails, and he gave kind of a brief outline of the 9 months, and within it, and on this retreat, at one point he was working with this Burmese concentration master, and 4 months with this guy, you know, just follow your breath and get to these deep, 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 deep states, you know. And then, at a certain point, he went there. He was in Massachusetts, where there's a kind of compound, which is the Insight Meditation Society, and then Forest Refuge, which is where he was spending most of his time, just kind of for self-retreat. And then there's the Buddhist Center Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, which is more of a academic and sort of study center. And after he'd done the 4 months with this Burmese master, he went over to the study center for a 10-day insight dialogue retreat, in which you're talking in very intentional ways on very intentional topics and working through things. And he said in his email, I got more insights in that 10 days than I did in the rest of the 9 months of silent practice. This is very interesting, coming from someone, I know him well, and he's a very serious meditator. You know, he likes to meditate very deeply, and I respect him tremendously. And I think this was a surprise for him, and it certainly was a surprise for me to hear that from him. But that's been my experience as well. It was when I started to work in more open forms that my deeper meditation experiences started to become more meaningful for me. I was able to connect them more. So again, the model of a Buddhist, well, you're supposed to just meditate and be silent. Talking isn't really meditation, or it's not spiritual. Another friend who spent a year as a nun doing in Burma, where she had to wear pink robes, by the way, the women in Burma. We'll talk about that. And it had nothing to do with breast cancer, you know. So, you know, that was a year-long retreat. Very, very serious practitioner. She did many 3-month retreats. A couple of years ago, she became a mother. She wrote a piece for the Inquiring Mind Journal, which is the Vipassana journal, saying, the experience I've had being a mother is much more enlightening. I've had loving kindness. I practiced it for years. Never had a clue. Now, the experience I'm having now is much more powerful. The moment-to-moment intention, you know, attention that I have to have, the awareness here that I have this guru who makes me wake up constantly, both literally and figuratively. Just so interesting to see, again, models. You know, her model was to be a serious, serious meditator. And of course, it's not to diminish that experience, because there's no doubt that that foundation then has informed her motherhood. And there's no doubt that what she's experiencing as a mother would not have been the same had she not done this practice. But just opening up our idea of what is a Buddhist. Traditionally, to become a Buddhist, you take refuge. And taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So if you want to be a Buddhist, just take refuge and say you're a Buddhist. I take refuge every morning, but I don't. Still not sure I want to be a Buddhist. One of my favorite teachings on this, San Sunim, who was a great Korean Zen master, in the late San Sunim, had a story in which one of his young students said, you know, I go home and my family is very concerned and in opposition. They're fundamentalist Christians, they really think it's terrible that I'm a Buddhist now, and they really, when I go home, there's all this conflict around that. And Sant Sneem said, when you go home, don't be a Buddhist, be a Buddha. Now we're getting somewhere. So what does that mean? Well, obviously it means trying to live up to the teachings. And this comes back to the idea of intention. And for me, intention is the lifesaver. Because I'm always going to be a bad Buddhist. I'm always going to fail. I'm going to fail in my meditation. I mean, how many times did you fail this morning during that 30 minutes? Fail to be mindful? Of course. I hope you did. I'm going to fail in my speech. Yeah, I'm going to kill ants sometimes. I actually try to kill ants compassionately. And I don't mean that in any woo-woo kind of way. What I mean is that if there's ants in the kitchen, and they don't belong there. They should know that. But if they are there, and I get angry, and I kill them with hatred, it feels unpleasant. And if I kill them rather with the feeling of I'm sorry that I have to do this, but this is what I have to do. And even maybe, may you be reborn in a higher realm, if there is such a thing as reincarnation. But just this kind of, rather than that in itself, to me, it's just kind of a little window into what I consider to be the difference between not being a Buddhist and being a Buddhist. In that moment, I'm trying to be a Buddhist. Not the kind of Buddhist that someone, that's the model. Because the model, I guess, is you don't kill the ants, but I'm not really sure what happens then. I guess ants are impermanent, and so they come and they go, and they're kind of seasonal. But in any case, this is what I'm able to do. And it's what's important to me, because it's what's in my heart more than, I don't kill ants, because I'm a Buddhist. Some model of being a goody-goody that really doesn't mean anything. And that's the way I was in my early practice. And meanwhile, as I say, I was breaking precepts left and right, but I didn't kill bugs. It was really phony. And this is what can happen when we're being a Buddhist, that we become phonies. And this is the last thing. To me, I'd rather be a bad Buddhist than a phony Buddhist. So then, for me, this comes back then to my own experience. It's not about showing to the world, or, wearing a badge of being a Buddhist. I'm inspired by the Dharma. I'm inspired by the Buddha's teachings. I'm inspired by my teachers, by the experiences I've had in practice. And I want to live that. And I want to find out what that means to live that. So the key to it isn't to act out some model, as far as I'm concerned. But it's to be aware of when I'm creating suffering for myself and for others. And to try not to do that. Not to not do that, but to try not to do that. So this is what the practice of mindfulness helps us to see. Am I creating suffering in this moment? So in your meditation, when you're sitting there and you're breathing, you can notice, wow, when you realize you're spacing out, you're thinking about how tragic it is that the 49ers aren't playing football today, which some of us feel bad about. You can notice, wow, how do I feel right now? Oh, I feel kind of sad. Well, why do I feel sad? Well, because I'm obsessing about this thing that's really irrelevant. And so you could say, I'm clinging. Oh, and if I just notice that, in noticing it, noticing a lot of the silly things we think is enough, because a lot of times it's like, oh, what? That's just easy to let go of. I mean, sometimes it's hard to let go of something. Sometimes there's things that have much deeper hooks. But a lot of times we can notice something and just come back to the breath. And in that moment, we are experiencing the essential teachings of the Buddha, that clinging causes suffering, letting go is freedom. That's the practice. And so we practice it in this formal way, and then we try to take that way of being in the world into our daily lives as well, and start to let that spread further and further into our lives. I was, as I was preparing for this talk yesterday, I thought of one of the teachings that I guess surprised me, disappointed me, and forced me to reflect again when I first encountered it, in which the Buddha says that suffering is caused by those who are dear. Born of those who are dear is the name of the sutta. And he just talks about how when the people who we are, let's say, attached to, in these clinical Buddhist terms, not clinical psychology terms, because I guess attachment is good in psychology, I don't know. But this idea that our family members or our partners or our dear friends, that suffering comes from them, from our relationship with them. Because if something bad happens to them, we grieve. If they are angry with us, we grieve. If they behave in ways we don't want them to, like if your child behaves in a way you don't want them to, you suffer. That's a kind of a tough one. And in this sutta, the queen, the Buddha actually interacted with a lot of royalty. He was kind of minor royalty, but the queen of this particular area, tells the king about this, and she believes it because she's a follower and devotee of the Buddha, and the king's very doubtful until he goes to the Buddha and he explains it to him. So I wanted to read the sutta yesterday to see if there was a conclusion, because it's very easy to assume that the conclusion of that is, well, if suffering is born of those who are dear, then you should not hold anyone dear. All right? I mean, it's kind of like, well, if I'm supposed to pay attention to my breath, if I'm thinking, then I'm doing it wrong. It's inferring something from a teaching. Well, I read the sutta carefully to the end, and the Buddha never says you shouldn't hold people dear. He just says suffering comes from this. And that, the way I understand that and the way I try to live that is not that I'm trying to avoid suffering. I don't really think that's what Buddhism is about. You're not supposed to suffer. I think, for me, what it's about is understanding suffering. Because it's actually where the real pain comes is when I don't understand. Suffering is a natural part of life. Gain and loss, love, attachment, grief. This is what life is made up of. Should we deny that? Try to turn that off? I don't think so. I don't even really think that's what the monastic life is meant to be. I think that it's about seeing that this is how things work. It's interesting that The second noble truth, as the Buddha describes it, is that the cause of suffering is our craving and our clinging. But when that teaching is actually expanded into more detail, we find that a craving and clinging are actually in the middle of something called dependent origination. The end, and what originates is suffering. And it depends on these factors, these 11 other factors. The first of which is ignorance. And in Buddhism, ignorance has a very specific meaning. It means that you don't understand the Four Noble Truths, and you don't understand the law of karma, which the Four Noble Truths are an expression of the law of karma. That you don't understand cause and effect, that you don't understand how suffering arises and how suffering ends. So what originates this whole chain that ends up in suffering is not understanding. It doesn't say that what originates it is so much that there is life in this way, that there are these natural qualities of life, these natural challenges. It just says that if you don't understand it, you're going to keep creating suffering. So this is where I really try to aim my practice and try to hold my practice. Because I can't live up to a model of spirituality or Buddhism that says, don't care about people, don't get enthusiastic or excited about things, don't enjoy sensual pleasures. I can't do that. I can't be that perfect Buddhist. To me, that would be suffering. Everybody has their own level of ability to let go. And it's true that the monastics that I know who are really devoted, who spend their lives in the robes, seem to be more able to let go of more things than I am. Nonetheless, someone like Ajahn Amaro, one of my teachers and one of the monks who was the co-abbot at Abhayagiri monastery, his mother died a few years ago. And he was there. He went back to England to be with her. And he was clearly grieved. This was difficult. And that, for me, I was grateful for that. If he'd just stayed here and kind of gone, well, she's just another being arising and passing away, I would have really kind of been like, oh, But that's not at all how he responded. He responded with real compassion. The two wings, they say, of Buddhism are wisdom and compassion. And to me, this is, if I'm going to be a Buddhist, this is what I want to be able to embody. I want to be able to care about people. And I want to be able to understand how suffering arises. I don't expect that when I die it's going to be a pleasant experience. But my hope is that I won't add to the problem by being confused about why it's happening. It's happening because I was born. That's what the Buddha says the cause of death is. The fundamental cause of death is being born. It's the inevitable result of being born. That's wisdom to me. If you are struggling, wow, oh God, why am I dying? What's going on? There's confusion that we see in some people who really feel like, what was life about? And, trying to kind of hang on until the bitter end. It's just building more suffering into what is already a difficult situation. Certainly the greatest loss we lose ourselves. And that, to me, again, is about wisdom and compassion. Compassion for myself. So finally, I'll just say that I don't think it helps you to be a Buddhist or to believe in Buddhism. That's just, the shell. To me, you have to try to live the Dharma. Try. You don't have to do it. Failure is built in. But if we can have our hearts pointed in that direction and trying to understand for ourselves what it means. Whether your question is, what is a Buddhist, or more vitally, how do I end suffering? How do I bring freedom? Then it's about how we live, not about some model. Look good. So I think I'll just leave it at that and see if there's any thoughts, reflections, questions, corrections. Yes?
Thank you for the question that you posed. I think it's interesting to look at cultural context. That here in the West, we pick up labels for religion the same way we do political party labels or the shoes I wear based on separation.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding of Asian culture, Hinduism, they made the Buddha one of the Hindu pantheons.
That's right.
Here he is, incarnation of Vishnu.
Mm-hmm.
You go to China, you can be Taoist, Confucian, Buddhist, depending on the time of day, or the occasion that it's called for. There's not this, I have to be separate. Asian culture seems to be much more live and let live, and the identity isn't constructed the same way we do here. And we suffer for that. We have to choose a particular label for ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yes, and in fact, it was Westerners who actually, I think, defined Buddhism as Buddhism.
Right. Those words don't exist in Asia.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly. I don't know enough about Asian culture. I haven't been to Asia, and to make a blanket statement. But I think what you're pointing to certainly is true. That the adoption of identities is another cause for suffering, basically. Which doesn't mean that we can't say we're Buddhist, but I think that we say that with an understanding. We say it with wisdom. Inside, we know what that means. So, because people will say to me, well, around the 12-step world, they get a taste of Buddhism and they go, well, I don't feel comfortable saying I'm an alcoholic because that's like creating an identity. And Buddhism, we're not supposed to have identities. I go, no, it's not about not having an identity. It's about seeing the illusory nature of that. Of course, we all have identities that we put on and take off. And it's to wear them lightly, not be, this is who I am. That's where the suffering comes from, not from saying, I'm a poet, or I'm a cook, or I'm a Buddhist, or I'm an alcoholic. That's not where the suffering comes. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to hear you speak again. And I was kind of amused because I went to James Barris's basics introductory lessons a long time ago, not too far away, and then I went to his Sangha, and I was interested in it, and occasionally I would talk to people about it, and they go, well, are you a Buddhist? And it really took me aback, because at first I thought, no, don't say that about me, because it was exotic, it was something pigeonholing and also stigmatizing. So I just went, no, I just like going to these meetings, which actually just turns out is what it was all about.
Yeah.
And in terms of practice, I don't know whether this analogy fits for you, but it's like when I think of practice, I think of it in the terms of exercising. So that I could go and live my life in a mindful way and bring that mindfulness to actions other than breathing. And it's sort of like, practicing with that brown pointed thingy so that you can be, some of you obviously explained football last week, so that you could be a really good player, and maybe 7 months out of the year you're doing weights, you're doing things on the field that you would never do in the actual game to get wisdom and physical strength. You practice. Mm-hmm. And then you drop that and you go out and you play your game. And that's how I think of practice. It's like, do your flexing, you skip your exercises of either kind, you're going to suffer. Yeah. But it's practice, it's not an end in itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's both. I think it is an end in itself. I mean, because in Buddhism, the understanding is that the means are the end. And that you can't separate the means and the end. But I agree nonetheless that meditation practice is also a strengthening of certain qualities. That we formally take this time to work out, just as you're describing, and kind of develop particularly mindfulness and as well as concentration. And retreats especially develop that quality of concentration that then you're able to use much more efficiently. And certainly the brain research now is starting to show that this isn't just an illusion, that there's actual things that happen to the brain in meditation, that the morphology of the brain changes in serious, I don't know if even serious, I think even in relatively unserious meditators, in regular meditation in any case. So that's certainly, I practice for both, I practice to practice, just to be on the cushion for that time, and to also to enjoy that time, because being quiet for a little while each day, not looking at a screen, or eating, or the other 2 or 3 other activities I do, is really relief. And there's that quality of calming and centering, opening, emptying, all these things that happen just by sitting still with my eyes closed, that is pleasant in and of itself, and is inspiring in and of itself. Because again, it's pointing to the fact that letting go brings freedom, and for another word for that would be happiness, and it's reminding me that I don't have to do anything in order to be happy, that I can just sit here. And if I do that in an intentional way, that can be really rich. I mean, it really kind of, as you're getting older, I don't know if any of you are getting older, but that natural tendency to reflect on your life and what you've done with your life and what you want to do with the rest of your life kind of comes up from time to time. Maybe all the time. And, I've written a couple of books, on these things. I'm recording a CD right now. It's like the accomplishments out in the world. You kind of go, okay. And then the books will go out of print and the CDs nobody will be listening to them. And, I'll be gone. Basically, at some point, not very far in the future, I'll be completely forgotten. And then what was my life? So to me, the only answer to that is all it was and all it is this right now, this moment right now. There's nothing else. So let me make the most of it. And making the most of it, again, is not doing something, it's being something. It's being awake. And when I meditate, it's the time when I'm most awake. So even though I'm doing nothing, and I'm certainly doing it with something of a goal in mind, some benefit that will come of it, in and of itself, it's precious to me. Just for that. This is the preciousness of this life that I'm experiencing right now, in closer to its fullness than many other moments. Somehow I feel like that got morbid.
Time for one more.
Okay. Yeah.
I originally had 3 questions, but I was going to pick one. I'm going to pick the one. I'm curious as to what you think it meant to the person whose family were evangelical Christians and who said he was a Buddhist, and yet the answer from his teacher was, be a Buddha. For me, I took it as, when you're there, be as compassionate as possible and participate in whatever family events or rituals you're able to, consistent with your being. I mean, for me, it would mean I might not be able to eat meat, but otherwise I might be okay with, and saying, holding hands and saying grace over meals, and going to church with that, if I were in that position. But I don't know, what is it that you see it as?
Yeah, I think very much what you're saying. I think to be compassionate and wise, 2 wings, to not wear your label or try to shove the teachings down people's throats. Which when you're new to something you're excited about, it's like, oh, this, and you want to tell your family about it or correct them. So yeah, I think it's. I think that's a big part of it. Is not in that circumstance, essentially not talking about Buddhism, but trying to act out the principles of Buddhism, which of course are going to be in complete harmony with Christianity. It's not going to be a conflict there. So yeah, I think very much what you said.
Kevin, Griffin, thank you so much.
Okay, Tom, thank you. Thank you all.
Before we go on to announcements, Kevin, I think you mentioned something earlier about someone finding your talk on our website. Was that
Yes.
what you- Yeah, so I just want to take a second and thank and recognize one of our members who has put forth great effort month in and month out to bring these talks to people far beyond these walls, and in turn bring people to us. And a great example of right effort. So we now have over 300 talks up on our website, and each one has been engineered and sound checked and edited and posted to the website, all through the effort of George Hubbard. Thank you. Do we have announcements?
I like, in that same light, Joe Kokoka is here, and he maintains our website. Another stalwart service that he's been doing for many years.
Jerry.
Thanks, Kevin, for coming today. I didn't hear your last talk, so I'm going to go listen to it. Next week we have open discussion, and that's where we break up into small groups and talk about topics, get to know your Sangha brothers, and it's a great experience. Also, I've been asked to announce our, I'll say sister Sangha, gay Buddhist Sangha that meets at 3 o'clock at Harper Street. The Venerable Robina Curtin is going to be speaking at Hartford Street next Sunday at 7 p.m. And I posted it today to the Apple website. You have to sign up because there's such limited space. Or if you are not on our Yahoo stuff, go to their website, Gay Buddhist Sangha, and there'll be a way for you to sign up. But she's only in town for a short amount of time. Do you know her, Kevin?
I know the name.
She's a Tibetan nun. was a lesbian separatist at one time, was editor of Mandela magazine, and she's an amazing person. She like channels her talks and stuff. And she's been here numerous times, but we usually try to have her come, but since she's living in other parts of the world, this might be an opportunity if you like her to go see her.
Doug, if you hear no other talk in that archive on our website, listen to her talk on karma and the stunned silence when she finishes.
If you can't go, you can always listen to her online.
Any other announcements? Do we have? Oh, Jim.
Yes, one more announcement. A couple weeks ago, I presented a great service opportunity in terms of maintaining our database and generating labels for our mailing of the newsletter. And David Linkako very kindly has offered to do the inputting, maintain the database, but so we're sort of going to split this. And we need someone to volunteer to do the mail merge and print out the labels. So think about it. This is about a half hour every 2 months. Okay? If you have any computer facility, and the mail merge programs are pretty straightforward. You can do it either in Excel or move them into Word if you're more comfortable with the table function there. This is without labels, our newsletters go out. Kevin doesn't get free marketing, you know. Many good things don't happen. We need these labels. And David will have maintained the database. So think about it. This is an easy but crucial job with great merit. Thank you. Talk to me.
Do we have a host? Dave?
Yes, I'm your host. There's some treats and some fruit. If you want to drink any tea, rinse your cup out with soapy water. There's also a list if you want to be on the mailing list. Towards 12:30, a number of us meet at the entranceway to the Sangha to go to lunch, and especially those that don't socialize that much, it's a really great opportunity to get to meet people. So I recommend that you join us. And last but not least, I'll be coming around with the Donna Bowl, and your generosity would be most greatly appreciated by the Sangha.
Great. Thank you. So during our social period, our three new guests, Drew, John, Paul, and David. Make them feel welcome, please. In lieu of our traditional dedication of merit, Kevin will lead us in a call and response dedication. So if we can gather in a circle. Oh, and also the black mats go in the far left corner.
So, as Tom said, just repeat after me. May all beings receive the blessings of my life.
May all beings receive the blessings of my life.
May I receive the blessings of my life.
May I receive the blessings of my life.
May those I love receive the blessings of my life.
May those I love receive the blessings of my life.
May those I do not love receive the blessings of my life.
May those I do not love receive the blessings of my life.
May those in this circle receive the blessings of my life.
May those in this circle receive the blessings of my life.
May all beings receive the blessings of my life.
May all beings receive the blessings of my life.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.